Today I'll be telling you about one of the most jaw-droppingly wonderful and impressive and amazing movies I've seen like in a long, long time. In fact, by far one of the most powerful movies I've ever seen in my entire life. That movie is Werner Herzog's Heart of Glass. Now, that is a very obscure movie, and you might be wondering also why I'm talking about it on a science fiction movie channel, because ostensibly this is a movie about a 18th century Bavarian village where they make glass, they like glass blowers. So on the surface, we're very far from science fiction and spaceships and all these things. But yet, when you watch it, it definitely belongs, I think, on a science fiction, like whatever it is that science fiction is aiming for, this movie reaches it. And this is also a little bit of what I'll be talking about, because this movie is very exemplary of what Herzog, as a filmmaker, as an artist, really, because he does other things besides movies. But what that one thing he's always looking for in his movies, which make them so powerful, and this is like in some ways perhaps the most concentrated version of that. But I'll be talking about all that later on, and also why it's just so goddamn powerful. So the movie is pretty obscure. There are two reasons why it's known. The few people who do know about it today, there are two reasons it's known for. The first is that the title, Heart of Glass, it's the title of a very, very, very famous Blondie song, which you've probably heard. I won't sing it now, and I won't put a clip because I would be banned from YouTube or whatever, but you know it, like one of the best songs of 70s, 80s was my favorite mixtape I made when I was at university. It was like the first song. It's an amazing song, and they took the title Heart of Glass from the poster of this very movie. But there's nothing in common besides the title, except that it's very cool. And the other reason the movie is known is because every actor except one, but there's a huge cast of characters, and everybody was hypnotized. Like Werner Herzog hypnotized everybody in the cast, like the bit actors and the background players and all these things, and of course all of the main actors except one, and which one that also matters a lot, as we'll be discovering later on. I mean, this movie is so smart and brilliant. And so what is the story? Well, ostensibly there are two stories really, and it's a big part of what makes one of the reasons why this movie is so brilliant. Well, ostensibly, this is the least interesting movie idea perhaps in the history of cinema. Like, I would never have watched it if it wasn't for the whole Herzog thing and he hypnotized the actors. I'm curious, right? But if the description is there is a village in Bavaria in the 18th century, and as I mentioned earlier, they have a glass blowing factory, and in fact they are very well known, this city and this factory, because they make a ruby glass, they make a red glass, and they have a top secret formula to make this glass, and it's so secret and so lucrative that there's only one person in the entire town who knows the formula. And unfortunately, he just died, and they can't find the recipe. So everybody's looking for it, right? Because they have all these orders, and the economy of the entire town rests upon this legendary ruby red glass. So everybody's looking for it, and there's a baron. He's very young. He's like in his 20s or something like that. And the young baron, he's actually slowly going insane as everybody's running around, looking under bushels to find this recipe. And that's ostensibly your TV guide, more or less, version of the story. But the actual story is not that at all, and we know that from the very beginning. Because there is a seer in town, like a guy who can see the future. He's just like one of the peasants, essentially, one of the townspeople, but he sees the future. And as the movie begins, we have a very long 8-minute sequence of essentially this guy in the mountains, in this field with cows grazing behind. And he's looking at the mountains and the rivers, and he's thinking aloud, and he's like the first thing he said, he's thinking about the end of the world. And the first thing he says is that, okay, I will quote it because I actually wrote it down, because this gives you a good idea of the tone of the movie. Yeah, so here's how your movie begins when he first speaks after like 3 minutes in the movie. He says, I look into the distance until the end of the world, and before the day is over, the end will come. And what end is he talking about? Well, he's basically, like in the next couple of sentences and with the images we're seeing, he's talking about what seems very much to be the end of the world. And as we discover further on in the movie, first of all, he's always right. This guy is never wrong. He's always seeing visions of the future. And for instance, there's a sequence where he's like in the tavern, and there are two friends, talking, and he's like drinking his beer. And he's like, I'm not sure if he has a friend or he's alone, but he's basically talking to himself, or seer, drinking his beer, like, oh yeah, this guy gets angry and he gets out his axe and he kills the other guy, and they're laughing, they're right there, right? But what do you know? Like 20 minutes later or an hour later, one of the guys does exactly what he says, and he kills the other guy, and and he just says it matter-of-factly, our seer does, because he's just relating what he's seeing. And everybody in town is well aware that he's a powerful seer, but and he's actually, apparently, from what I saw online, he's actually based on a real historical character. Like Herzog liked doing that. So there was apparently a real Bavarian seer who could see the future, around that time, I suppose, and he's based on that guy. So everybody's coming to him like, please tell us, where is the formula? You can see the future. You have all these visions like a prophet. Where is the paper? Where is the formula? And he doesn't know, because it doesn't work like that. But what he does know is that a bear is coming to, kill the cows or something like that. He knows that this guy is going to kill his friend. He knows all these things. He knows there's going to be a fire here, and this dish is going to break. And he keeps talking about his visions. And actually, we're seeing the town and their day-to-day activities as they're, waking up and milking the cows and trying to make the glass, and all the factory workers are waiting around because they don't have the formulas. They're like staring into the distance. But more or less, there's elements of the movie that are very documentary, if you like. So it feels sometimes like a documentary on glass blowing, if you like. Except they're not blowing glass because they're waiting for the formula, and so people having breakfast, all these things, right? But at the same time, our seer is talking about his visions and telling us about all the terrible things are going to happen. So and which they do, spoilers, again, at the beginning of the movie, that everything this guy says is going to come to come true. But at the same time, he's a prophet, essentially. So he's talking like a prophet and a poet are essentially the same thing in many ways. Like, he has visions and he's relating poetic visions in a poetic language. So you can't be totally sure. Again, is he talking about the end of the world, or is he talking about like, what does he mean by a fire? Is it an actual fire? Is it a metaphor? What's going on, right? So that's basically your movie. But here's where I mentioned the hypnosis thing, because describing this movie is in a sense impossible, because this is the closest you will ever come to having an actual, like, to experiencing a film dream or illusion, in a sense. Like, this is like if you're having an illusion, like a hallucination, like a psychotic hallucination, except it's a prophetic vision and slash a dream, and it's filmed, but you're living it at the same time. It's both a hallucination and real at the same time. And this is because of the hypnosis thing. So essentially, everybody's like, Herzog had the idea of hypnotizing his actors, during production, like during pre-production. He came up with the story, and then he said, "Oh, it would be cool to hypnotize the people." But the effect it has is that everybody is like massively strange. So they know their lines, but they have these strange poses which they strike for no understandable reason, but it's arising from like the deep collective unconscious, or like instinct or something like that. So it's very stagey, very expressionist, movie, like Nosferatu. In fact, this movie in many ways feels a lot like Herzog's Nosferatu remake, right? Especially like the Adjani scenes. It has this very dreamy element. So essentially what you have is a bunch of non-professional actors, like amateur actors mostly, in a dream state, going purely on like the instinct, but not animal instinct. It's like the deep instinct of like the collective psyche, right? This is an actual filmed dream, is what the movie is. And it's a movie about a dream of the end of the world, like a dream of mass, like apocalypse, right? And like, this was shot in the 70s, so the Cold War during the 70s was not in its worst period. This is before the détente, like Jimmy Carter's détente, I think. But it's around that period. Things were relatively smooth between the USSR and the US, from memory. Like, it wasn't the Cold War. It wasn't like the missile, like Cuban Missile Crisis or something like that, or even the Reagan period, where there were frequent reasons to believe that nuclear Armageddon might be upon us, right? So when this movie is made, we're not in that's not the mood. That's not the vibe. But still, there, behind the scenes, or beneath the current, beneath the waves, that's still kind of the vibe, right? We're still in a context where there are two hegemonic blocs, and they're fighting over the world, and they have these massive nuclear arsenals. So the idea of mass annihilation is kind of always there, precisely like in the unconscious, essentially, because even though everything seems cool, everybody knows there are all these nuclear weapons and these two factions that ostensibly hate each other, like the East and the West, and the Soviets and the Americans. So it's kind of there. And this movie ultimately, I won't spoil it, but in many ways, that is actually what this movie is about. In many ways, it taps into that, and there's a particularity. Like, there's like the dream images one has, like elements of the psyche. They always mean many things at the same time. Like, a dream symbol is always a symbol of many things, right? Like, the psyche sends you these symbols because they are what is closest to what it is trying to express to you. but it is still a polysemic symbol, if you like. Essentially, the idea is that it's contrary to like even a word has many meanings, right? Like if I say, flower, it can mean many things, right? But the symbols of the unconscious are always expressing many different realities on many different levels, and this movie does that. So it is about this village, but it is really like a dream about not only like the imminent apocalypse or the possible apocalypse of the Cold War, but like even deeper like psychic undercurrents that lie beneath that, like whatever like whatever the Cold War is the archetype of, like the deeper conflict beneath that. That is somewhat what the movie is about, like the deepest, most horrendous, most horrific conflagration of forces within nature and the psyche. And so I'm giving you like a general, like intellectualized version of it. But again, when I'm making, if I'm talking about an intellectualized version of a work of art, I'm giving you the intellectual ideas, like the concepts. But concepts aren't feelings. Movies and works of art evoke the feelings, and the feelings are much closer to the actual content of what, let us say, like the psyche is stepping into. Like the feelings are actually closer to the actual experience itself, if you like. So this is a movie about the end of the world and like a felt sense of the end of the world, but it is also about awe and the sublime. And I will finish on that because every Werner Herzog movie is about two things, essentially. It's about like the darkness, and the darkness is like an almost Lovecraftian level of horror and madness and cruelty. Like the nature is cruel, essentially, in Herzog's worldview. Like there's no God and everything. Like and people are very often very mean spirited and do horrible things. And he shows a lot of that. And like Bad Lieutenant, with the Port of Call, New Orleans, with Nicolas Cage, is a lot about that. He's this crazy, corrupt cop doing horrible things and completely insane things. So that's pretty typical of a Herzog movie. But also, all his movies, even that Bad Lieutenant, which I actually loved, I thought it was really, really cool, but all these movies are also, and even more frequently so, about a quest. They're about people looking for the sublime. You see, for looking for that, again, that feeling of something that is greater than the pain, greater than the madness, greater than the dreary day-to-day, doing the dishes or whatever, like cleaning up the kids, or like, the day-to-day stuff, like digging up, shit, with your shovel because you have pigs, because you have to eat, like that, and... But there's that level, but stories about I didn't see that one, but he did many documentaries, and so there's this couple who are going into volcanoes. Essentially, it was just this crazy idea because it's pure madness. You're always this close to dying, but they're attracted to this, and Herzog is attracted to that in the same way that he was attracted to that Grizzly Man story, which I did see, which was which is all the footage of this guy, which you probably have heard of, who was essentially more or less he was a very troubled guy who used to do drugs. And he quit the drugs, but he was still very troubled. So he started going camping with grizzly bears and filming it. And he loved the bears so much and was crying about the bears. And he saw himself as the defender of the bears against the evils of civilization. Except one year, the bears ate him, and it was filmed. You know, so stuff like that. And Herzog did a movie about that, and he's showing this guy who's clearly deeply, deeply, deeply flawed and troubled, and but he's looking for something. And the thing is, like, every Herzog movie is about people looking for something like that, or you know. Yeah, like I'm thinking, are his early movies like Even Dwarves Started Small and Signs of Life or Caspar Hauser, Enigma of Caspar Hauser, like those early 70s movies, like how much are they on the spectrum of people looking for the sublime versus the cruelty? Many of them are more on the cruelty side, but still, I mean, even those movies, that's kind of always the conflict, essentially, or like the tension between cruelty, madness, horror, but at the same time, this sense of there is something deeper, there's something more profound, something which is truly of the nature of the awe of the cosmos, and I must find it. So Herzog is always looking for it, and not only that, but he's always looking for it, but he always finds it. Here's the thing, right? So Herzog, who doesn't believe in God at all, and who believes that nature is more or less evil, and he paints all these crazy people, but he keeps finding God, essentially, but it's not it's beyond God. It's like the awe beyond God. That's what he's showing in his movies, in a sense. Like, yeah, what if God means something? If the experience of like the truly sublime means something, and it does, well, you know, that's what we have in his movies, and that's what we have here. You know, I often think about a soldier. It was I think something Joseph Campbell said. He was talking about this soldier who was talking about like an Apocalypse Now type of event. Like he was on a beach and there were explosions and, you know, hundreds of thousands of people fighting and people blowing up everywhere. You know, a true scene of horror, of war horror. And this soldier had seen it, like D-Day essentially, something like that. And he asked this soldier what it was like, and the word he used, what did he say? He said it was sublime. Because it was so, yeah, truly grandiose. Like it was so much beyond our normal experience, that, you know, it was truly like beyond good and evil, and beyond, you know, like even like the opposition between matter and spirit or whatever. It was just this spectacle and this experience because he participated in it. Like it's just, that's the thing. You feel it. You bond with this experience of the cosmos, and he saw it through this. He had that experience, you know, during a war, like a huge battle, which was horror, pure horror. But that's precisely it. Like, and that's kind of like, you know, you don't have to experience it that way, but when you get to that level of you know, truly powerful spiritual experiences, like what we call spiritual, all our words are weak. None of our words can convey those experiences, right? Because they are beyond the mental and the categories that the mental creates, which are what words are. And there this experience of participating in something that is so much beyond us, and yet of which we're part, right? So, but again, these are intellectualized versions of it, of a guy talking about the movie, you know, on a more or less intellectual level. And Herzog movies are the experience of it. They are a chunk of it. They're a slice of it. They are a, a silver, a crystal box with the cosmos inside. And like from a guy who doesn't believe in that stuff, and yet who, again, keeps looking for it and keeps finding it and keeps giving it to us. And yeah, Heart of Glass is from all the movies. They all do it. They're all wonderful. I've seen like quite a few of his movies. But this is like the purest expression. This is the one where I'm most in awe when I watch it. And because of that hypnosis thing, I think he really manages to really tap into that deep, deep, deep part of our, what we call the psyche, but that part of us which is always in direct contact with that thing from which the awe comes, right? Basically. So it's quite an achievement. It is, okay, so who is this for? Not for everybody, obviously. People, you might, I mean, I obviously, I love it. But it is a bunch of hypnotized people doing weird poses. And sometimes for like very long sequences, and it's brilliantly directed. And Herzog is actually like a very, very good craftsman as a filmmaker, and he has elements of the documentarian, but also like he has a strong experimental, if you like, quality to his work. So he'll mix long, in like never-ending shots of a guy in this, like the shot in one shot of the guy in the field, and it's about like 1 minute long, and he's looking, there are cows grazing behind him, and he's looking like that for something like a whole minute, right? But then when the villagers come to talk to him a few minutes later, he'll put jump cuts in the middle of the conversation, like he's talking and then whoop, jump cut, and he'll continue with another sentence, like almost not like Jean-Luc Godard, not quite breathless, but something kind of like that, And he does a lot of very clever things. Herzog does to actually keep things interesting and moving along. He mixes film stocks, and he makes kind of, as I mentioned, he mixes techniques like the long shots and the short stocks and the jump cuts, as I said. So he's very smart and very, very clever in what he does, and also very instinctual, which also helps. He has the intelligence, but also very good instincts, and he knows how to listen to them, right? Which is how he knew to use hypnosis in this movie. And but again, you have to be into that kind of thing. There's there's a sequence, I just watched it just now, and bits of it. And so a mother comes and wakes up her like 22-year-old daughter or something like that, and she's naked, so she wakes her up and she slaps her on the ass, and the girl kind of wakes up, and she has a very strange face, but she's hypnotized, so it takes her forever to wake up, and she does all these strange movements. It's so surreal. And like the next shot is this picture of the window with like the chamber, like her drinking pitcher, and with this plate which is with a loaf of bread and tons of like flies, like hundreds of flies, and like they're all dead, but it looks kind of like a Rembrandt painting, you see. So yeah, so you have bits of Rembrandt, bits of documentary, bits of like the dreamy, crazy thing, but it's not crazy. It's not a reproduction of craziness. It's not a picture of craziness. It's the pure experience of where craziness comes from. Like crazy people are people who can't manage the messages they're getting from that part of the psyche, right? But this movie manages, like this movie is what happens when you can manage it, like when you can put the pure unconscious on the screen, and it like as an experience. So yeah, so the movie does that, but again, it's not for everybody. So if you like, Tarkovsky, You should enjoy this. I mean, the tone is obviously very different, but Tarkovsky or the guy who did Possession, Andrzej Zulewski, again, also very different, but kind of like anything like European new wave. You should enjoy this. Also, like this will be sacrilegious, but I also like Jess Franco movies and Jean Rollin movies, which are very trashy and which have nowhere near the same level of artistry. Nor integrity in many cases, but both these guys, Jess Franco and Jean Rollin, they're kind of aiming like they hit kind of the same zone, like that same poetic, dreamy, unconscious part, and they hit it more or less accidentally. One feels like sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes they try to be poetic and it doesn't work, like Jean Rollin sometimes does that. But when it does work, even though it's not very artful, it taps directly into that unconscious and it has that atmospheric dreamy tone. So if you like that, if you like the Vampiros Lesbos, Jess Franco, right, if you like that, though obviously this is a million times better in all conceivable ways, but I've always loved actually like certainly Vampiros Lesbos and many Jess Franco movies because of that tone, and Jean Rollin I mentioned, and again they're mostly hacks, but that dreamy tone, when they hit it, it's there. So, and Herzog is like the pure concentrated version of that. So again, if Jess Franco and Jean Rollin are chamomile, Werner Herzog is fentanyl. Okay, so he's the purest concentrated version of the pure experience, the pure presence of the deepest levels of the psyche, projected on a movie about the end of the world and about cruelty and madness and the sublime and the quest for the sublime and the attainment, like the experience of it, put on film. So it's pretty goddamn cool, right? So I liked it. You can see there's a DVD by Anchor Bay, an old DVD, you might be able to find it. It's on Tubi. There are ads though, obviously, so it will break the spell, because watching the movie is like being hypnotized. It has that that rhythm, and there's also the music by Popol Vuh, who also did the music for Aguirre, Wrath of God, which is obviously a fantastic movie, which kind of feels like it has some elements of it, because again, this is like the 70s Herzog. It feels like his documentary about the guy on skis, which was fantastic, like The Ecstasy of Woodcarver Steiner, I think it's called. All these movies, the ones I mentioned earlier, it kind of feels like that. And part of that other feel is because of the music, and some people don't like it. I saw a comment like on Amazon who thought it was like kitschy or something like that, and yeah, but it's also like super cool. It's there's a lot of yodeling and there's a lot of it's prog yodeling is what it is, with Tangerine Dream soundscapes and stuff like that, superimposed on hypnotized people going crazy as their city is destroyed, as a metaphor for the end of the world, maybe. But yeah, so I'll finish on this. Herzog is probably the best. I mean, of filmmakers working today and still making movies, he's probably the best right now, and he's the most consistent in that he does many different movies, but he's always had that quest in him, which he's always like looking for in his movies, as I mentioned, and this is again such a perfect expression of something that is so deep inside us and so profound, and which in many ways we're always looking for, that sense of oneness and belonging to something deeper than even humanity itself, and something very, very like deeper than primordial in our psyche. And Herzog does it, and it's also often, maybe less this one, but he's also like funny and certainly very, very smart and very creative. So, yeah. Again, of all the movies I've watched, like in the last certainly like 20 years, let's say, I mean, Memories of Murder was great. I could name plenty, like many good movies, but this one is very special. This one is like being touched by God, except God is an atheist. But he's still sending you messages in your sleep. So yeah, with strange proggy synth stuff and synth music. So yeah, check it out if you're into that sort of thing. And on top of that, as a bonus, nobody knows it. It's very obscure. Even Herzog has an interview when it was shown on the big screen and he hadn't seen it in like 30, 40 years or something like that. So it's very obscure, but that's even better. This is one of those movies where you're like, where has this movie been all my life? Well, it was in the deepest recesses of your psyche and it's finally before your eyes. Check it out, Heart of Glass, one of the best movie experiences, if you're into that sort of thing, one of the deepest movie experiences you will ever have. So, that's it for today. Keep watching the skies, live long and prosper. Life is good. Take care. Also, I don't believe in the apocalypse. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. Take care. See you soon. Bye.